What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and this one will break down what's going on with SPY, Nvidia, Tesla, the QQQ, and many tickers out there. I'm going to talk about some very big news that came out for the markets that's very important and what you should be watching for as we have some big earnings coming out for tomorrow, and how all of this stuff may affect all these different stocks. But before I begin down about all this information, talk about why the market pumped the way it did today after some very bullish news came out, I have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, so SPY is up 0.47% for the day, holding up quite nicely after getting more bullish news. But I want to admit to everyone that in my video from yesterday, I was looking at a possible head and shoulders developing on SPY. We ended up actually invalidating this. However, that was my video from yesterday, and so much could happen in the market that I can't really predict, such as strong earnings and some crazy things that were said by Goldman Sachs for today, for instance. And sometimes you have to make these adjustments. So that's why during my pre-market video for today, I was looking at the pre-market, and I told you that if we broke this 451 area, if we broke this resistance, because this was the high of the pre-market, we would likely see the market start to push up quite nicely and reach this high again. And if it broke this, it would invalidate the head and shoulders, and this thing would start flying very, very nicely. I was eyeing this like 452 level, and we ended up breaking above that. But I also said that if we broke below this 450 support, which was very close to the low right here during the pre-market, we would likely see SPY sink all the way down to the 449.5 area, then potentially the very high 448s. Now, what happened? We actually got this drop when the market opened, got a very nice liquidity grab, and the market started pumping. Then as the market pumped, it just kept going and going and going. And we had a potential bullish triangle developing on it, right? And during this time, during the development of this bullish triangle, I told you that the market was looking bullish during my second video of the day. And I told you the odds do favor us breaking to the upside again because the trend was so bullish at the time, and we had so much bullish news that kept coming out. And as a result, the market continued to push up, and we saw SPY reach very close to about 455 a share. So very, very nice day. The market just saw lots of bullish news, but the question is, will it continue to pump like this, or are we going to see a small pullback first before it tries to continue? How is it going to look in my opinion? So I'm going to break that down and try to be as unbiased as possible and just talk about what the chart is suggesting, what the news is telling us so far. Now, why did the market pump? Let me just add that Goldman Sachs has come out and they have cut the odds of a US recession going into next year based off the findings of their chief economists and based off what they're seeing from their research. This is very important because this is leading to more positive sentiments and more buying pressure for the markets, and the market's loving news just like this. That's part of why the market pumped. There's also this talk about how we're expecting a big decline in the Q2 earnings reports. We're expecting an 8% decline relative to the same period of last year, and very, very bad looking margins. We're looking for a big margin decline according to what the estimates are. And this could be both good or bad for the markets. It's bad because once again, guys, we could see declines in earnings, which would be very bad, but it's also good because the expectations are that they're going to do really horrible. All these companies are going to be failing and flopping on their faces. And so far, we're not seeing that. With the lowered expectations, most companies so far have been beating expectations, but not all of them. We did get some relatively bad ones just a couple of minutes ago. I'm going to talk about them. But don't forget, we have big banks as well coming out for tomorrow that could change everything for the markets as well. Now, to add on to this, let me just mention that we had Microsoft come out and they announced something very big about how they have a new AI tool, which they're going to be charging for with their overall Office documents plans. That is good news for them, and that helped the entire AI sector pump. This was not the only reason why the market pumped, but this did play a role in it. There were also things that happened involving the US's diplomacy from a political standpoint with the US House for new policy changes. So that all helped the market pump the way it did. And sentiment was very, very excited after getting some good earnings. Now, with these lowered expectations, we saw a lot of big banks beat. I talked about this in the morning, just as a reminder. Bank of America beat, Charles Schwab, Morgan Stanley, they all beat on earnings in the morning. That's why the market was pumping as well. So all of these things came together and helped the market pump. The question is, what about for tomorrow? How are things looking? Well, let's first look at some data. There's not really anything too big coming out for tomorrow, but we do have the building permits data coming out 1 hour before the market opens to give us more information about how supply chains are looking. Now, is this so important? Not necessarily. It's not like that huge compared to earnings, but what makes tomorrow so big is the fact that we have some big earnings dropping. Tomorrow we have Goldman Sachs, ASML, we have Ally Bank and NASDAQ and other banks as well reporting earnings before the market opens. Goldman Sachs is going to be a big one for when the market's about to open tomorrow morning. And then on top of that, for tomorrow, after the market closes, we have some huge earnings coming out. We have Tesla, we have Netflix, we have United, we have IBM, and many others. We have Discover too. This is going to be absolutely massive for the stock market. Expect a big move going forward. This is going to affect the market approaching the close. After the market closes, then during the after hours, I'm going to be seeing a big reaction to Tesla and Netflix. And then it's going to continue going into Thursday. That's how impactful this is going to be. This is why tomorrow is going to be a huge day. So just be ready. I will talk about these individually a little bit later. But for now, things are looking very, very promising in terms of price action. But now let's talk about one more thing. I just want to mention that some earnings came out today after the market closed just a couple of minutes ago. And most of them actually ended up missing. We saw Interactive Brokers miss. They dropped about 2.6% after missing on EPS. Omnicom, sorry about that. Omnicom Group ended up missing as well on their revenue. And we did see EPS beat on them, if anything, but they still saw the shares drop as a result of that. And then on top of that, we saw, JB Hunt Transport Services end up actually declining too. And Western Alliance ended up also dropping after missing on EPS, but they beat on revenue. So overall, we got some mixed earnings today after the market closed, which could cause the market to slow down a little bit for tomorrow. But don't forget there's an external factor that's going to be Goldman Sachs reporting tomorrow morning. That's going to be one of the biggest ones for tomorrow morning. And I'm saying that because Goldman Sachs today, they said that, there's less likely of a chance that the US is going to enter a recession. So that tells me they're very confident. And why would they be saying something like this if they have very bad earnings? To me, it seems like they're going to report some good earnings tomorrow. So it could affect the markets big time. So we're going to break down these technicals now. What do I see going forward? Well, with the declines and the misses in earnings that happened this morning, not this morning, sorry, just a couple of minutes ago, and the potential crossover on the PPO, we could see the market kind of gap down just a little bit in the pre-market tomorrow. So maybe it retests this like 453 zone to 452.69, then bounces off that. We could end up opening the 453s. But then because of Tesla reporting earnings and Netflix and etc., we could see SPY try to just range this area for some time, maybe hold up. I don't really see it crashing tomorrow. I think it's going to try to hold up for the most part. And then once Tesla and all these companies announce earnings, we're going to see a very big reaction. So some important levels to watch for would be these. If we break above 454, the next important resistance is going to be between 454.86 to 455. The entire zone right there has quite a bit of resistance. If we break above that, watch 456.03. And above that, we're going to be watching the next major resistance is going to be all the way up to about this 457.8 area. So there's a lot of room for upside if we do break above 456. Now, if we break down, you're going to be watching support at 453.5, 452.69 to 452.5, and then all the way down to the 451.6 area, then 451, and then 450, and lower than that comes like 449, and etc. What do I think is more likely, though? I think the market may slow down a little bit in the pre-market. We're going to open up a little bit lower, most likely, looking at how much we pumped already. I'm thinking that we're going to see a big reaction to Goldman Sachs, maybe intraday, and any other pieces of news that come out. I think the odds favor the market trying to like bounce and then come back down and just trade kind of flat. But I think it's going to try to hold around these levels just for the time being and see some consolidation. Right? I'm kind of anticipating like a trend day before we start to see a bigger move afterwards. And that's what tends to happen on days like this. I do not think the market's going to drop really hard all the way back down to 450. I don't really see that. We may see a slight decline in the pre-market and a bounce. And I'm just going to expect more sideways price action. However, going into Thursday, expect a much bigger move depending on Tesla. Now let's talk about Tesla. It's going to be a big one for tomorrow. Tesla is once again holding up quite nicely. One of the things I said on this channel, I released a video over the weekend. I told you Tesla's going to explode approaching earnings. If you look at Tesla from the last week, okay, just a couple of days ago, this thing was in the 270s. It was at 265 just 8 days ago. Now it's at 295. This thing ran like crazy, crazy upside for Tesla. It was very explosive over an extended period of time. Now the question is, how high will Tesla go? Well, my target on Tesla was 295, so it already reached my target, but I think it's going to try to go for 300. If it breaks 295 tomorrow, we're going to be watching 300. Maybe it like tries to pump in the morning, cools off a bit, and it may just try to get very close to $300. And then maybe at the very end of the day, it may sell off just a tiny bit because that's what tends to happen as earnings approaches. but I'm basically going to be targeting this 295 to 300 area. I think we already reached the high, or we're going to make one last final high, but it's not really that huge of a move. That's about it for Tesla. And then we're going to see a massive reaction to how earnings goes. I must warn everyone that the margins are not going to look that great in my opinion, but Tesla has a good chance at meeting on revenue and EPS as it typically does. I'm just not as sure about how Tesla's going to do with those margins. Okay, and that could lead to lots of fears, which Wall Street and the mainstream news will take advantage of. They will use that to bash Tesla, so be very careful. It's going to make a massive, massive move. Will it be as big as Nvidia? That's even a possibility. It's possible it moves as much as Nvidia. Maybe it won't move that much. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe not like 30%, maybe like a 10% move is possible. And just be prepared for some crazy volatility. It's going to be big for Tesla. Now, for Aapl, this is once again very tight. My prediction was it would be very sideways, and that's what we're seeing so far. It has resistance around 194 and support around 192.5. I'm expecting lots of choppy price action, maybe a gap down tomorrow to retest 192, then a bounce and some more sideways price action. That's what I'm seeing for Aapl. Not a whole lot going on with it just yet. It may decline a little bit and retest 192.5, so watch that carefully in the pre-market. But if it breaks above 194, it does have potential to start to push up to about 195 plus. Then we have this resistance around 196. Right now, these are very specific, like dollar values, like 195, 196, because that's the way Apple's been moving. It's a very, very interesting stock, very simple. You can see, like right now, it tested around 192.5, and the next support is like 19. Resistance, I mean, is like 193. Then we have like 194. It's a very, very interesting stock. Very simple to watch. If it breaks down, we're going to be watching 192.5. I think it's going to do that in the pre-market, try to bounce intraday, then come back down around here. It's going to just trade sideways. So it's starting to look a tiny bit weak, looking at how it moved today, seeing the decline, but then it got a bounce afterwards. I think it's going to be very sideways. That's all I'm really seeing for Aapl. Going into the QQQ, however, this thing was looking very strong after the news came out from Microsoft. This was sideways, not really doing much. Then Microsoft made the announcement, and this thing went flying up to 387. If we break this resistance, it could get very close to 390. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching 385 as support. If that fails, let's watch 384. 382.7 is going to come after that, then 382 flat. What do I think it's going to do? Probably gap down in the pre-market because the MACD is showing some weakness, and also because of these declines we saw in some earnings so far. It may gap down a little bit, then try to bounce intraday thanks to Goldman Sachs and Tesla. And then as Tesla pumps, we may see that try to hold the QQQ up for some time. I think it's just going to range trade in this range for the time being. Then we're going to see a big reaction after Tesla and Netflix report earnings. For Nvidia, I'm anticipating something very interesting as well. It may cool off in the pre-market, come all the way back down to 470, if not 468 or so, retest the mid to high 460s before trying to bounce again. And it's going to likely try to hold around these levels, in my opinion. I predicted in the morning that this thing would come down to about this 460 area, maybe a little bit lower, and try to bounce after that. And I wasn't sure how much it would bounce by. I thought it would be kind of flat, but then we got some very bullish news that helped it pump a lot more. So there's a chance it's going to decline just a tiny bit in the pre-market, then try to bounce very similarly and try to make its way up to this high level again. 480 is not off the table. And don't forget, regardless of what Nvidia does, I have a target of over $500 by the time we approach August. I think it's very likely it's going to make its way up there quite easily. There's a good chance 500 is coming. It's looking quite nice accumulation on it. We're going to be watching how it reacts to 480 very soon. Now, it could be testing 480 as soon as tomorrow after getting the bounce. So watch that carefully. If it breaks it, it could be pushing for new highs. For Microsoft, we're going to be watching this as well. It also broke its high, but we're going to be watching how does it react to this next support zone. We have some support at 358, very close to that level. And then if that fails, it's going to come all the way down to about this. I'm going to find where the EMA happens to be. I think it was right about here on at the 15-minute. I think I was actually eyeing this one. So 355 is going to be support. If that fails us, the next major support is going to be 350, then 347.8. If it breaks to the upside, you're going to be watching this imbalance right here around this 364 level. My guts tells me it may try to get a bounce to 364, then come right back down and just trade kind of sideways from here. It got a very big pump. And generally, when stocks pump this hard, they tend to slow down over time. But there's going to be some hype still associated with it. It may try to get one more bounce and a continuation of the decline later on. That's what I'm leaning towards for Microsoft. For AMD, we're going to be watching this 118 level. Could this thing try to break above it? If it manages to do so, we're going to be watching it fly to 120. There's a potential accumulation structure that has been developing, maybe like a cup and handle that could be in the process of forming. I'm leaning more bullish if we get above 120. If it breaks 120, I'm I'm going to be watching 122 and then potentially 125, which is where we have another imbalance. I think it's going to go for that. I have that feeling, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer than other stocks out there. Netflix is continuing to pump. There's a lot of excitement approaching earnings. Could this thing break above 500? We'll have to wait and see. For tomorrow, I think it's going to cool off a little bit in the morning, retest about 470, then try to bounce and start pushing for 480 plus, and it could make its way even higher than that to 485. But then I am anticipating a slowdown as the end of the day comes, and a very big move after earnings. If we get strong earnings, Netflix is going to go flying for the 500s. If it fails, if it doesn't do too well, however the news is interpreted, whether it's like margins, whether it's anything like that, we could see Netflix slow down big time. We could see a big drop all the way down to the 450 area, if not lower than that. Just like Nvidia, how it made a massive move, we could see something similar with Netflix. All right, so watch it carefully. Tomorrow is going to be big for it. Looking at the NASDAQ currently, this thing was getting ready for a decline right over here, but it ended up getting a nice bounce off our 50 EMA on the 15-minute time frame, sorry, and it's continuing to uptrend. The trend is still looking bullish. There's nothing really bearish about this chart now that it got the bounce, and it may decline just a little bit. It is a possibility it declines just a bit. It gaps down, retests the 50 and tries to bounce again, and continues to push to a new high. That's also very possible. And I'm not saying it's an all-time high. I'm just talking about this high right over here. That's a possibility. So we're going to be watching to see if that happens. Same thing for SPY. It may try to gap down just a little bit and try to bounce intraday. And I'm leaning more in that direction. So I'm going to be seeing how this thing ends up moving. Did I say SPY? I meant SPX. I'm sorry about that, guys. Anyways, when it comes to the dollar, this thing is just very flat. It's not really doing too much. It's stuck between 199.5, doing the whole back and forth thing. Uh, if this thing broke out really hard, that could slow the markets down. It hasn't done that. If it breaks down, that could help the markets pump more. It's really flat, so it's not really as impactful as of right now. For Coinbase, it came down as we predicted, all the way down to our $100 target. It actually came down to about 101, so it came very close. And now it's going to likely just trade sideways from here. I'm going to be watching this 100 area again. I think it's going to retest this in the morning, then try to bounce. But if anything, it's just very sideways. And I think it's just going to remain very stationary, just like how it's been for the past couple of days. And I just see the trend continuing. I'm not really seeing a big break unless we get some kind of news. For Google, it's looking a little bit more bearish, getting this like weird distribution phase. And we also have this imbalance down here around this 121 area. So if it breaks below 123, I was talking about this level yesterday. If it breaks below 123, we're going to be watching 121 on Google. And I think the odds favor that being tested from a technical standpoint. But don't forget that additional factors such as the news will affect how it moves. But for now, I do have a feeling it's going to just decline and retest 123, then eventually 121. For Amazon, it's very similar, right? It's also looking like it's declining, forming a head and shoulders up here. And I'm going to be watching how does this thing react to some very, very important levels. It is kind of stuck between our 15,200. So I'm going to be watching, does it break below 132? If so, watch 131.5, or does it try to bounce and make its way up to about 133.7 or like 133.8? If that's the case, we could be seeing 134.7. So I'm kind of in the middle with Amazon. There's not a whole lot going on with it, but I have a good feeling that this is looking a little bit more bearish on the 30-minute. On the 4-hour time frame, it's no different. So I'm trying to be in the middle, seeing how it's between support and resistance. But on the 4-hour time frame, I'm going to be watching this test of 131.5. I think it's going to come down here. I don't know if it's going to bounce here or not. It could try to bounce, or it may continue to decline. So far, it looks like it's going to decline a little bit more and retest 131.5. And we will see if it tries to bounce or not. So watch that very carefully on Amazon on the 4-hour 50 EMA. And last but not least, for Meta, this thing came down a little bit lower below this support right over here. It tried to bounce a little bit, and now it's just trying to trade sideways. So it didn't really decline as hard as it could have. Now it's trying to hold up, so I'm anticipating some more potential sideways price action, but there is a potential inverse head and shoulders forming, so there's a chance we might see Meta try to push up for 316 very soon. I think the odds favor this thing trying to make its way up to 316, and if it breaks above this, it's going to try to fill the gap for the 320s. For now, what do I think it's going to do? Maybe it cools off a little bit in the pre-market, retests like 309, tries to bounce, and just remains in this range for some time. But eventually, I think it's going to retest this 314 resistance, which it could break. And if it does do so, 316 plus could come. All right. And if it breaks 316, like I said, 320 plus could come as well. So I'm leaning in the direction of it cooling off a bit, then bouncing intraday, and eventually trying to make its way up. All right, just based off this trend. All right, guys, so that's what I have for this video. It's going to be a very crazy day for tomorrow. Lots of big earnings are coming both during the pre-market and also during the after hours. And tomorrow is going to be an earnings day. Earnings are going to dictate how the market moves. So watch these levels very carefully and do what you have to do. All right. So thank you so much for listening. I will see you guys tomorrow morning during my pre-market video. The entire market to the moon as the long term is very bright. And peace out.